Dots. I'm Dr. Latifat. I'm the host of the Money Fit MD podcast. This is where we help badass women physicians just like you learn simple and effective tools to build wealth from the inside out. That way, we can create wealth and bigger impact without all the burnout. Enjoy the episode.
So many physicians want to do things with their lives, but are so limited by a lot of things, money, time, the how, the not believing that it's possible, or just feeling like your idea is so out there that you're like, I don't even know how to make this happen. So if that's you, you're definitely going to want to listen to this conversation from the beginning to the end, because we're going to be bringing some good stuff with you. And that's me and my guest, Dr. Kristine Goins. Welcome to the hood.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So for our audience that's listening, number one is I'm glad to have you here. We've been trying to make this schedule thing work, but you know what? It is what it is. We're here right now and we're about to bring some value to y'all. But for those that are listening that are like, okay, Latifat, who is she? What is she about? Can you tell us? Who are you? What do you do? And why do I think that they should listen to you?
So my name is Kristine Goins. I am an integrative adult, child, and adolescent psychiatrist and a digital nomad. And I help doctors work less and live anywhere.
Digital nomad, like what the heck is that? Talk to us. What is that? Digital sounds like you sell CDs or you have CDs, and nomad means you're homeless.
Yeah. So digital meaning that I work fully remotely. All of my income is fully remote, and nomad meaning that I travel full time. And there's a lot of different ways that you can be a nomad. It's really individualized. And the way that I do it is that I spend a month in every city and about 3 months in every country and just travel the world.
Fabulous. How long have you been doing that?
For 3 years.
Okay, so let's go back to 3 years ago. When did you graduate from training? Where were you for training, in the US or outside of the US?
So I did my child and adolescent fellowship at Yale Child Study Center in Connecticut. So I finished up there in 2018. And so that's when I completed my training, and I did 3 years of attending life before I booked my ticket to abroad.
I almost want to ask where that attending life was. Sounds like you're trying to get out of there.
Yes.
But tell me though, like, did you have any idea that you were going to be traveling? Like, where did that interest stem from for you? And when did that actually come into the picture of like, maybe I would like to travel and work?
Yes. So it came actually quite early in my life. I was 8 when I decided I was going to become a physician. I didn't have any physicians in my family, but I knew then that that's what I was going to do. And when I was a teenager is when I decided that I wanted to travel the world. I never had the means or the opportunity to travel when I was young, but my best friend and I, who's also a family medicine physician, we would go to the library as teenagers and we would read books by Eric Jerome Dickey. And he was this incredible author that wrote about Black professional polyglots who traveled all over the world. Like, I'm going to be one of these kind of women. And so I got to travel a lot in my imagination. And that's really what spearheaded this idea of like, okay, how am I going to blend these lives of being a doctor and a world traveler?
All right, so just so I make sure I understand, you were a teenager, and while your age mates were reading about romance and crushes and whatever the heck books are about these days, well, I was reading romance novels when I was a teenager. You decided to go to the library and check out a book about Black people living their best lives. Why did you, like, what brought that interest on? And I say that in the sense of, was it something exciting for you, or was it something like an escape for you?
I think that it might have been both, because it integrated all of those juicy things that we love as teenagers too. It had the romance, it had the crime, it had all kinds of things popping off that I was excited to read about, but it also had this ability to shape characters in a way where they were multidimensional. Yeah, they might have done a little crime and they spoke 4 languages and they also had to go to Amsterdam, for the weekend. So it was this idea that, wow, you can really be more than one thing. You can be a doctor and you can be a world traveler. Like there's no limitation on what you can be. And so I think that was the fascination with, this author, was that I could be even more than I could dream of at that time.
I love that. I could be more than I could dream of. I mean, I think that's such a great quote, right? Because many times we think we can only be as successful as we dream, but I'm a firm believer that where my ceiling lies is where God's foot and God's floor is, and like the literally I have no limits in that regard. So I love that you brought that on. What age were you when you did your first international travel?
I was already in my 20s.
Wow. So you lasted that long. You had this ideas from all the library books. You went through college. And how did you survive not living out your your novel fantasy?
I was holding on for dear life. Like I was just like, when am I going to get the chance, the opportunity to do this? It would come up in so many different ways. In college, I was a Spanish minor. And so my dream was, okay, I'm going to do a semester abroad. So I had everything ready. I scrapped every dollar. I worked at the cafeteria. I did everything I could to pay for this semester abroad. And when I got all my dollars together and paid for it, right before I was about to go, I got early acceptance into a medical school program that was going to start medical school as a senior, which means I needed to forfeit my first international trip ever and forfeit my money. So I was like, wait, what? After all the work that I did. So it was the first time that I started to recognize, like, wow, this path to medicine, it seems like it requires sacrificing things that I really love.
Wow. And how did you make that decision of whether you were going to maybe go to that school or keep, sacrifice? Because that's something that a lot of people have to make decisions about.
At the time, I had a lot of mentors around me that really focused on medicine. Medicine was everything. We would have these like part-time jobs in secret on the side, and they find out about it and be like, you get out of that job right now. You need to be studying that extra 5 hours this week. They were very strict about that. And so, when they heard, I mean, you have a chance to start medical school in your senior year or you're going to Spain, like, what are you talking about? You're not going to Spain. So for me, it was following, my advisors, following the people that I really looked up to at that time. And sometimes we find, especially when we're younger and we're more impressionable, that it can take us out of alignment. Like it can take us out of a certain path for us, kind of looking up to others or following their advice or recommendations. But that was the path that I chose. It got me here and I have no regrets. So it must have all been for the good of figuring things out.
And at what point did you decide that psychiatry was going to be the thing for you?
I decided that pretty early on. It was between surgery and psychiatry. And I realize now, talking to so many doctors, that a lot of people go back and forth between surgery and psychiatry because they're both super intrusive in different ways. But when I thought about my lifestyle, I was always big into lifestyle and balance. And I was like, okay, but which one of these would give me the most flexibility and freedom in the lifestyle I want in the future? And I really thought psychiatry could give me more of that. And I really loved the mind. My mom's a psychologist. I try not to blame things on my mom, but I think that influenced me also.
I love it. So this entire time, when you're thinking about medicine and you think about lifestyle, that is rare, by the way, because most of us are not taught to think about lifestyle. So were you still thinking about lifestyle in terms of like traveling, or were you thinking about lifetime in terms of like just not being in the OR for 90 hours a week?
I was thinking about all of it. Like I was thinking about how could I travel? How could I, spend time with my family? How could I not work long hours? Like I was never really interested in working long hours. And so how could I make sure that I had the space for everything that I loved in life and not just this one particular thing that I loved, which was medicine.
So you were clear about your values pretty
Yeah,
early,
very
and you
early.
decided what your specialty was going to be. I mean, between two things you loved. So it wasn't like you were sacrificing you weren't picking something you hated, but you were clear about your values. And I think you listed 3 or 4 values. You talked about your time. You talked about your time in terms of like being able to have the time to do whatever you wanted to do, but you're also talking and thinking about your time in terms of the length of daily work hours, right? And you also talked about your family as well. So those sound like really important values to you.
For sure.
I love that. I love that so much. And when I say I love that, I mean, to each their own. I'm not saying I love your choices, because it doesn't matter whether I love your choices, but I love the prioritizing your values and then asking yourself, how can I work? How can I live the life that I want, prioritizing my value? I think it's so, because it reminds me of when I was applying for jobs outside of fellowship. I knew that I did not want to work 100% like a full FTE, full time, whatever E means, employment. And I remember getting weird looks when, as a fellow interviewing for jobs, people are like, especially women physicians, interestingly enough, when I said, I am not going to accept a job that's not going to give me zero point 0.8 FTE. And I got stares, which was interesting. So I just think like I could literally do an entire hour of conversation of the importance of not listening to certain people, no matter how kind their opinions are, but also being clear about what your values are. Because at the end of the day, you're going to spend 24 hours with you. So you got to be clear about that.
For sure.
So let's go to now. Let's fast forward to you being a fellow and doing your, psychiatry and your specialization. Something happened that made you choose to work locally as an employed physician. What was that? And was that also still based on your values, or what was it that made you go, I want to work here and not do the other things that I've been dreaming of doing?
I think it was really staying the course and following the algorithm. I think we have ideas, we have dreams, they're given to us, and we can choose to follow that path, or we can choose the default path that's set before us. And so I think I initially just went the default path. There's either private practice or there's academia. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just starting out. I have all these dreams. I'll get to them eventually. We all think we're going to get to them eventually. So, that's what I did. And so I went into academia, and simultaneously I started an LLC and started doing some, consulting contracting on the side. And that's what I did out of training. And so that's why.
And what now made you take the jump from that to it is time?
Yeah. So, throughout different periods of my training, from medical school, residency, fellowship, all of it, there were always periods of just intense burnout. When I'm working over 60, 70 hours a week on call every third day, like that kind of life for me really impacts my mental health. And I always thought like, okay, but once I become an attending, it's all over, like that's when everything's going to be great. And so moving into that attending life, I thought this is my chance to really like have the balance that I want to have. But what I found was that it was actually even more overwhelming than training because I had more responsibilities. I was, engaged in more projects. I was working and doing the type of work that I always wanted to do with the communities that I wanted to be involved with. I had so much variety in my career and I learned from all of those experiences and I loved it, but I was exhausted. I was so exhausted and I was trying to ignore it because I thought like, I mean, it must be me because why would I be so exhausted if this is the work they gave to me? It must be doable. Am I just not competent? Like, what is the issue? And I would talk to other people and they're just like, no, we just got to push through. Like, I had the same feeling. I'm also exhausted, but this is just what it is. And it got to the point that I would have chest pains in the middle of the day that felt like I was having a heart attack, but I knew it probably wasn't that because I go get my preventative care at all times. I would have whole body twitches. It was really concerning. And I knew that this was all just a physical manifestation of misalignment. That's what I knew it was. And so during this period of time, also, we were in the pandemic and both of my grandmothers died. And that really helped me to put a spotlight on time. I didn't have my plan. I had a 5-year plan. Oh, it's just going to happen eventually. And I said, what if you don't have 5 years? What are you going to do? You're just not going to live your dream. And so I sat down with my 5-year plan, crossed some things out, turned it into a 5-month plan, and bought a one-way ticket to Colombia without telling anyone.
I love that. I mean, so much good stuff in there. I loved what you said too about the physical manifestation of misalignment. You're a psychiatrist, you're way, way more qualified than I am when it comes to mental health. Um, I know who my bosses are when I see them, let's just say. But as a GI doctor, right, we get, a lot of brain gut connection and physical manifestation of misalignment, physical manifestation of mal thoughts or mal-belief, not living in where we are supposed to live and living where other people are meant to live. It will not only steal your future and alter the people that you're meant to impact, but it will also cause you pain and literally steal your life, even if you still have breath. So I'm glad that you woke up at 3 years after and not 30 years after. And if you're listening and it's been 30 years, I'm glad it's 30 years and not 60 years after, right? Because it's never too late to change the direction. But I do want to ask you, you said I didn't tell anyone. Talk to me about that. Where you hiding from?
My mother, you know how mothers can do.
Yes. Tom, let's talk about mothers. Mine's here right now, my house. Well, yes. Okay, so tell us about that part. We're not mother. If you're listening to this, he's my mother. You're not allowed to listen to this conversation. Put on your earplugs. You're not invited to this conversation. So tell us about your mama, and I'll talk about mine too.
Yeah, well, my mom was the first person to say, you're not going anywhere. I don't know where you think you're going, but you're not going there. That place is not safe, and so I knew that resistance would come up, not only with her. I don't want to pick on her too much. She's gonna listen. Not only with her, but even with other people that I loved, right? And I think it just comes from a sense of, people project their own fear onto you, of course, and they want the best for you. They love you, they care about you, but they don't necessarily know your path. And you have to know what your path is. And that's what I realized in that moment. And I said, everyone that I love that in resistance to this is going to come around in their own time. And I just have to have the grace and patience to allow that to occur. And in the meantime, move forward with what I know is right, with what I know my aligned, path and vision is. and let them catch up later. And if I could tell you, I was talking to my mom last week. She was at a family event with extended family members, and she said, they asked when you're coming back to the US. And I told them she's never coming back. Never. My daughter travels all over the world. I told them that. I told them I'm visiting you here, there. And I was like, I know, Mom. And just it's a completely different person.
I hear you. I mean, I think I may have shared on the podcast before, but when we decided to travel for a year with our kids, also my dad had died about 2 years before. And so my mom, I was like, Mom, I'm the only physician in my family. My parents were not college educated. They sacrificed a lot for us to get to where we are. And for them, seeing us succeed is like a win for them, but also a demonstration that their sacrifice didn't go in vain. I mean, there was a time I didn't see my mother for 5 years after I moved to the United States. So just to tell you the kind of sacrifice. And so now imagine that big old head girl that you did all those sacrifice from. Not telling you, I just quit my job so I can take your 3 of your grandkids across the world to places we've never been to. And she was like freaked out, and the people that love you the most are the ones that are going to try hard to stop you. And it's not because they don't love you, it's because they love you so much, they're afraid of the uncertainty. The same thing that may have prevented you from taking the jump that you knew even before you knew that you were meant to take. And it's a trusting of that, almost like that leaning in, and that I call it following the crumbs, because you don't necessarily know, you just trust and believe that you've been led to a place that's different from where you may have planned to in the first place. And they will try to stop you because of the same reason why you hadn't done it before. Now you just happen to have access to a deeper calling, resources, community, podcasts like this one that is helping you build belief in the fact that it's possible for you to not fall on your face after doing this. So I love that you brought the mama. But you booked a one-way ticket. So tell us about that. Did you have how you were going to earn in mind at that point when you bought that first class, or I don't know, first one-way ticket? But also, did you save money? And how did you prep financially for that first trip? Or was it more like, my life is falling apart and I got to save my own life by just living and figuring it out? What was the story?
Yeah, so the story was, I have been practicing essentialism for years before that. And essentialism really being that I have been living with intentionality when it came to my time, my energy, my attention, and my money. So I like to circulate my money based off of my values. And it's really like creating a vacuum that allows you to remove everything that's unnecessary. It's not about lack. It's not about what you can't afford. It's not about comparing yourself to the Joneses or whoever else or what they're doing. It's about creating space and the capacity for everything that you really, really want and more of that. So that's how I was circulating my money. And because of that, I would really end up investing or saving 60 to 70% of whatever I was making, and just living the life that I wanted, And so when I left, I knew that, for one, if the worst case scenario, you always think of the worst case, I'm going to end up under a bridge somewhere in Colombia. Nobody's going to know my name. You always think of the worst case, but I knew even in the worst case scenario, before I would come back to my mom's couch, in your mind, I would have enough to survive and live the normal life I was already living for 2 years or more, I knew that was there, but it was more of like a psychological freedom of knowing that. I knew I also didn't need to utilize it because I basically just quit academia altogether, but continued having my own LLC, which I had since I graduated, since I finished fellowship. And so it was really just doing more of what I had designed for myself, what I had created that was my own, and not doing what had been designed for me.
I love that. And so, did you know that you were going to still be practicing medicine at that point, or were you just interested in traveling and living?
I knew I was going to still be doing the contract work that I was doing. I was doing it always 1 day a week while I did academia the other 4 days. Well, you know, it's never 4 days, like 5, 6 days, but not get paid for it. So that 1 day though that I was doing contract work, I just turned it into 2 days, and I said, okay, for the rest of my life, I think I can work 2 days a week and be off 5 days. So that's just the schedule that I've had since then.
And when you say contract work, it's still psychiatry, and you're able to practice from anywhere in the world as long as you have internet. Is that correct?
Yes. So I would partner with cash-based medical institutions or do cash-based consulting that don't have the same, you know, regulations as like Medicaid, Medicare, insurance companies and things like that, so that I could do all of my work virtually from
And are
anywhere.
you still doing that currently?
Yes, I still do some of that.
Tell us a little bit more about that, because a lot of times physicians think if I'm living outside of the country, I cannot practice within the US. Tell us what you have learned from your own experience, and also from probably learning more over the last couple of years than most physicians have in the past about that.
Yeah, and so some of the stipulations and requirements around that, of course, it depends on what it is that you're doing and where you're working and all the details. So I always encourage you to, you know, talk to a business attorney. I've talked to like 7. So it's like become one of my hobbies now. But basically, when you're practicing, you want to make sure that you are, you know, consulting with or contracting and seeing patients in areas where you actually have a medical license, and that is where the patient is located. So sometimes people are saying like, oh, you're in Georgia, the country. Are you seeing patients out there? No, I'm not seeing any patients in Georgia. I only see patients where my license is located. And so that's where I do all of my work. And so that's the main issue. It's not so much where you are, but where your patient is located. Now, if you are insurance-based, if you're doing Medicaid, Medicare, they care about where the provider is located. So you do want to, you know, adhere to that or really keep that into consideration as well.
Let's talk about some fun. So what does your time look like now? Because it's been 3 years since you started nomading,
Yeah.
if that's an action word, that I'm making an action word or not. I have this theory that every word is made up by someone, so I can make up whatever. So I don't care if it exists. Nomading is like a thing now. But what is your, like, if we looked at the last 12 months, for example, what does that look like? What did that look like for you? How many countries were you in? Tell us about how your time looks these days.
Yeah. So really it looks like every month I'm in a different city. Every 3 months I'm typically in a different country. And so just overall, I'm kind of moving throughout these different cultures and spaces as I'm going along. But my, let's say, day-to-day, week to week, it looks like 2 days a week, I'm doing some type of consulting or contracting with organizations. And for the last year, I also have been working with doctors, helping them to work less and live anywhere. And so that coaching also happens, you know, in that 2-day period. And so that's what my life looks like in the work sense for those couple days. Outside of those couple days, I am traveling, I'm getting to know locals in the area, I'm engaging in my other passions, I'm doing yoga, probably hiking. I'm inviting my family member. My mom will be here in a few days. I'm inviting my family members out and my friends out to hang out with them. I study wine, and so I'm an advanced wine professional. So I will be studying or I'll be traveling through the wine regions. I'll take singing lessons, anything that my heart desires. If I'm like, oh, that sounds good, put that on my list. I'm going to be doing that. That's what I do.
I love it. I love it. And, you know, I think it's one thing that I've learned. Well, I learned many things while I was traveling, but one thing that I've learned is the value of slowly traveling. So many times we have this bingy mindset when it comes to travel. It's like, okay, I'm going to be here for 2 days. What can I stuff in there? And then we come back, and that's the whole idea about needing a vacation from your vacation comes in, right? And I love that you talked about just slowing down, because that's literally what we did, like slowing down, exploring, seeing the locals, just being like really just like a human being, like we're meant to be in, not necessarily just do, and just being in the places that we're in. And people are like, so where did you go there? Like what? And I'm like, we did the things that we wanted to do, which may be deciding to go explore the market, right? Or deciding that we wanted to go, the kids wanted to go snorkeling or whatever. And just being, it heals your soul in ways that you may not even know. And I'm glad that you getting to experience that. I do
100%. Mhm.
I do have a question for you. So you are single, is that correct or no?
I'm partnered, but my
Your
partner
part
lives in Argentina.
is your partner from Argentina?
Yeah.
Did you meet your partner during travels?
Yes.
Oh, okay, all right. How fun. Okay, all right. So that's another plug for the single people out there. You never know where you're gonna meet or where you're gonna meet them. So just keep that in mind. But if someone is like, but I am married or I have kids or I have a, what tips do you have for them? Or, I know that it may not be for lived experience, but what are some of the things that you may suggest for someone that's like, but, now as they're hearing you talk?
I think it's the same for any individual. Get into community and look at the examples of people who are already doing this. There are so many nomadic families out there who are living their best lives, kiddos who are learning about cultures and languages and life experience that they can't learn about that in school. The depth of their expertise and their experience on, travel and food and history, it's really diverse and really beautiful. So I would say the first thing you want to do is get onto one of these. Don't get stuck in the social media, but just be very specific. Go on, check out these nomadic families who are already out there doing it. That's something that I actually help families with as well. What are the educational resources? Where are the communities where you can join in world schooling and all these other opportunities to really tap in locally and just globally with other people who have a like-minded, idea about what truly living is.
I 100% agree with you, because even though, like, the year off that we had, I don't describe myself as a nomad, but it's so important to find the right communities and finding groups for what's world schooling for families. And yes, when you get into those groups, there are a bunch of great people there. People that are going to say, we're running away because we don't want to vaccinate our kids. Like, people have their different reasons, but with every resource, you take the good and you leave the non-helpful. And that was really, really helpful for us. The reasons people give for not doing the things they want to do, like, oh, what about the kids? What about if they don't like the food? What about if there was illness? And just literally writing all that down on a paper and answering those questions for yourself. So for us, like, my oldest was actually a really picky eater before we left. Like, she is really selective. She hated their school cafeteria food. She's the girl that reads. I did not teach her to read labels. She reads labels and goes, why is there sweet potato puree in orange juice, or like whatever crap people put in stuff? She has that finesse for taste. And so we were concerned a little bit about, what if we travel and she doesn't like the food? And what we realized was that, number one, I'm a physician. I know that what's important, she's not going to starve to death. We're going to find solutions for her to eat food to sustain life. And the crazy thing that happened was, she didn't do okay during our travel when it came to food. She did crazy amazing. Like, her palate opened up so much. She was eating things that I was giving the side eye. She's like, octopus balls, like literally on the streets of Thailand market. I want to taste that, mommy. Like Curacao, the food, she just, I mean, I'm like, listen, y'all, we planned for 2 adult food and 3 keto foods. It was like 3 adults eating and 2 ketos. That's so sometimes it doesn't work out as well as you think or as bad as you think. It works out so much better than that. And it's normal to have fear, but you get to decide if you let it stop you. What do you say to that?
100%, 100%. You know, it's also being able to step out of your comfort zone. When you step out of the routine, there's something in you that really opens up, you know, that's willing to step outside the box, that's willing to be absorbed in your present day, moment to moment awareness. And you get more creative, you tap into your imagination, you expand, not just your palate, which I think that's amazing what your daughter was able to experience. But it's like your palate in your mind, you know, it's beautiful.
Absolutely. And one of the other non-intended consequences, well, there's 5 billion of them, to be honest with you, um, was we ended up coming back and they were going to a good school before we left, but we decided that we wanted something different because getting exposed to other cultures does more than educate your kids. It changes them. It changes the way they learn. It changes their mindset. So if you listen to this episode, I mean, there's a reason why Kristine is here. Is because I really, really am a huge advocate for doing the scary, even if that means changing your zip code to a different country. Let me ask you a question though. What is 1 or 2 fears, like the biggest fears that you had on this journey, or you found with other, people that you've worked with or women physicians that we haven't talked about yet?
I think the biggest fear that I had was around finances. You know, it's always around money. I think it's not just money. I think money typically is the excuse. Like it's the holder for what we're really afraid of, which could be fear of success, of failure, of the unknown. But we just say like, but the money. That's what it was for me. I was like, but the money, but what about my student loans? But what about this? But what, you know, and that was even coming from someone who had been practicing in a way where I had been saving, I had been investing, I had been doing the things that I needed to do to make such a jump. And even for people who maybe haven't been doing that, you can get on the road to doing that in no time and be on your way in the next 6 months, you know? But I think it was just those self-limiting thoughts around how I would make it work and just not knowing what the outcome was. I knew the exhaustion. I knew that path very clearly. And so there's some comfort in that. At least I know what it is. But the willingness to be uncomfortable, the willingness to not know, I don't know exactly what this is something I hear. I don't know what the groceries are going to cost. They're probably going to cost less than they're costing you in DC right now. We don't know exactly the amount, but you will find, you know, it's not just that uncertainty will keep us bound every time.
And what helped you with that uncertainty?
I decided to flip it on its head. You know, every time something comes up for me and it's like, okay, what about this? I'm like, well, what if the financial piece is actually the reason why you should do this? You think it's the reason why you shouldn't do this. But what if this is actually the key to your financial freedom? And that's what I found it was. I found that it actually was a way to fast track my way to my financial freedom rather than being the limitation to, you know, the life that I wanted to create it. But if I didn't ever flip it around and ask myself that question, I would probably still be in that same place, hoping for 5 years to pass.
100,000%. And, when I'm talking to women physicians, sometimes I get emails and people are like, Latifat, I want to learn how to create my own rich life. I want to learn how to do money. I want to learn how to make my money work for me. But in order to learn in close proximity to you, because they can learn from my podcast, which is, zero cost. They can learn from my book, Done with Broke, which is on Amazon and like less than $20. They can learn from like the challenges I do. We have like 5-day challenges that are $297 for VIP. So there are ways that they can learn low cost. But some people are like just ready to immerse themselves and like really do the work. And they're like, but my finances is stopping me from investing in myself. And I'm like, but what if you investing in yourself is actually what's going to help your finances? What if that's so flipping things on its head? Honestly, I think that is a good tool and a good skill for everybody to have, because regardless of what it is, like the answer, one of my mentors says, the answer is the question. Right? The answer is the question. So the question, and that's why it's important to ask yourself, learn how to ask good questions, because the answer really becomes, the question really becomes the answer, which is, this is how do I, it's like, that's like, do it. That's how, right? So I love that you brought that up. Oh, this has been so good. Anything else you wanted to share with our audience? And as in addition to answering this question for us, tell us also where people can find you, but anything else you wanted to share with our audience that we haven't talked about so far?
I think I just want to share that if you have a deep spiritual longing for something, if there's an inspiration that is hitting you, a desire, don't ignore that. If you need to get clear on what that ideal life for you is, maybe it's being able to take a spontaneous, 3-month trip to Europe with your family. Maybe it's just being available in the middle of the afternoon to take a parent to the doctor, or to just sit down and have a cup of tea. Maybe it's being able to travel the world and be anywhere you want to be at any given time. Whatever it is that you want to create, allow yourself to have that experience. Really, travel is this outward journey for an inward purpose. So don't deny it. You deserve that.
I love it. Sounded like a rhyme. Don't deny it. You deserve that. It should be like a back music for some like hit play, like don't deny. All right. So tell me, how do you help physicians? And I don't know if it's only physicians you help or humans in general that are trying to create their own nomadic life and experience for however long they choose. Because again, part of it too is sometimes we think it has to be permanent. It doesn't have to be. It could be for seasons. So how do you help physicians, and where can our people find you?
Yes. So I help doctors get clear on the life that they really want. Maybe it is traveling 6 months a year with family. Some people like to do a hybrid of the work that they do, both digitally and being there in person. For some people, it's just being able to be where they want to be in the world while they work and live and play. And so that is really what I focus on. Also providing step-by-step guidance to create a strategic plan on how to get from where they currently are to the life that they want. And that's including solidifying their remote job, whether it's clinical or non-clinical, an opportunity, or even the entrepreneurial path, or like me, do a hybrid. It really, the beauty is that you design whatever kind of life you want. It doesn't look like mine. It doesn't look like anyone else's. It's yours. And it's really helping people to understand that, so that they can live the joyous, fulfilling life as a physician that they choose. And then also making that path smooth. So providing the support, the accountability, the professional resources that they need on that journey to both time, location, and financial freedom. And they could find me at thenomadmd.com online. They can find me on IG at the Nomad MDs or on Facebook at the Nomad MDs.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for coming to hang out with me for us figuring out this whole schedule, time zone. She's like, where? I'm like, I'm in Asia and she's in Argentina. And I'm like, I don't, but all that. So I'm so glad that we're able to make it work right now. It's been a pleasure hanging out with you. I know this is going to help so many people. So if you guys have loved this episode, you not know where you can go find Dr. Kristine. And also just leave us a review wherever you are listening right now. Let us know what your thoughts are, if this helps, because it does help other people find us. And share this episode with other physicians. I think that if we want physicians to be well, the way to do that is not through slavery. The way to do that is not by taking the power of choice away. The way we do that is by giving physicians the power of choice so that we can choose the life we want. Because when we're alive, like literally alive, our soul, our mind, our money alive, every freaking person gets to benefit from us. So anyways, it's been fun. Thanks for hanging out with me. And guys, I'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.